Hey, thanks for joining me today. You know, once the Israelites left the bondage of Egypt, they found themselves in the wilderness where they were waiting and imagining what their future would be like in this thing called the Promised Land. It wasn't an easy time. It was a transition time. And how many of you know transitions are never easy because they involve patience and waiting? While they were transitioning, God spoke to Moses to tell the people that when they arrived in the land, they were to gather before him 3 times a year. And one of those times was the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Harvest, that's being celebrated right now by Jews around the world. This week, I saw farmers beginning the process of harvesting their fields. You know, farmers work diligently all year long, waiting for this moment, this season of reward for their labor. Farmers understand something, that harvest involves a process. It begins with the hard work of preparing the ground, sowing the seed. And farmers understand that if they don't sow seed, they won't reap a harvest in the fall. Israel understood that reality, both physically and spiritually. You know, for those who faithfully sow, God promises that they will reap a harvest or reward for their faithfulness. And the Feast of Tabernacles this month reminds us that our lives are filled with all kinds of seeds that need to be sown into the lives of those in this world. Seeds of love, kindness, finances, talents, and other resources that God has given to us. But sadly, many people have limited their harvest blessing by not sowing the seeds that God has given them. The Bible tells us that when we sow seed, we can expect a harvest. That's a spiritual principle. And as we look at the fields being harvested around us this month, it's simply a reminder that you can't reap a harvest if you're not willing to sow seeds. And once you've sown those seeds, it requires waiting and patience. Why? Because at times, it seems like nothing is growing. It seems like nothing is happening. It seems that we may not reap a harvest. Maybe it feels like that right now in your life. But I want you to know that every time you see a farmer out in the fields harvesting this month, let it remind you that God keeps his promises, and that if we are faithful to sow the seeds that God gives us, we will experience a harvest of God's blessing in our lives. Have you been sowing seeds with your time, your talent, your treasure, your words, your service? If you have, I want you to know that you can expect to see a harvest of God's blessing in your life. So during this Feast of Tabernacles, be encouraged and rejoice, because I got good news for you. God is faithful, and your harvest, it's on the way. And I look forward to seeing you this Sunday in service. God bless.